saying there are tools we have that we can use, and I think it's shameful that we're not using them. Christina Romer, President Obama's former chief economic advisor, said the U.S. government should be doing more to help families suffering from unemployment. Dr. Romer joins me today from Berkeley, where she is now back as a professor of economics there. Dr. Romer, thanks for being with us. You talked about the devastation that's out there happening to the American families. What is it that the government can do more that it's not already doing to help people?
I think that's the number one question that we should be talking about. You know, we saw the employment report last Friday that still 8.8% of the American labor force is unemployed. So what are those tools? I mean, I've talked a lot about the Federal Reserve. You know, they're engaged in a second round of quantitative easing, but they've made it pretty clear that it's going to stop in June as planned. And I think that's a mistake. I think the evidence is that it's been very effective, and certainly QE1 was very effective. I don't understand why we'd be dialing back that tool, because I think it is certainly very helpful.
So let's talk about that. Well, let's talk about the Fed a little bit more, because I think a lot of people would say the Fed's been very effective at helping the financial markets and helping people at the upper end of income scale, but there hasn't really been a translation into wage growth, certainly for the average worker, or substantial hiring. So why would the Fed be doing more help average Americans?
Oh, because if you in fact look at what quantitative easing does, it tends to lower long-term interest rates. It tends to lower the price of the dollar. Both of those things are good for ordinary families. A lower long-term interest rates means firms can do investment. It means it's easier for consumers to afford borrowing. So that tends to encourage spending. And when people spend, that puts people back to work. A lower price of the dollar tends to make our goods more competitive in foreign markets, so we export more. If we're exporting more, we need more workers to produce it. So absolutely, those policies can help ordinary people. That's you know, the ultimate goal for monetary policy. I think your point that, you know, I think what I'd like is for the Fed to come at the unemployment problem with the same passion that it came when the financial system was in such distress. And I think that is something that I know certain members of the Board of Governors feel, but I think that needs to be a more consistent policy of the whole organization.
Right. Well, we can agree there, but isn't it true, though, that long-term rates have risen since the Fed announced QE2 in August? And also, I think a lot of people would say a weaker dollar, that means the dollar goes not as far when I go to the grocery store or put gas in my tank and things of that nature. So I think a lot of Americans are feeling like the weaker dollar is hurting them, not helping them.
All right, so you need to be very careful that, you know, it's hard to evaluate what quantitative easing has done, say, to long-term interest rates, because, of course, there are lots of announcement effects. So they were talking about it long before they actually put it into place. What I can tell you is the academic studies that have looked at this absolutely say that quantitative easing does what we thought it was going to do. You know, and of course, on the price of the dollar, we're not talking about, you know, sort of what's happening to your purchasing power here. It's talking about what's the price of the dollar in the foreign exchange market. And, you know, I think everyone agrees that a lower price of the dollar tends to make us export more and certainly tends to raise GDP, which ultimately is what causes employment and causes the unemployment rate to come down.
Okay, so let's move beyond the Fed, because you also said, and this was a speech you gave at Vanderbilt a few weeks ago, that there are fiscally responsible ways that the government can be doing more. Obviously, there's a huge debate going on in Washington right now about the size of government, how much money we're spending, and I think a lot of people would say, you know, we just can't afford to do more. How can we do it in a fiscally responsible way?
All right, so the first thing I'd say is we can't afford not to do more. For heaven's sakes, with this many people unemployed, think of what that's doing to government revenues, to government support payments for people that are struggling through unemployment. So if all you're worried about is the budget deficit, getting us growing again, making sure that the unemployment that we have now doesn't turn into structural unemployment that'll last for years, if not decades, is in fact really important, not just to people, but to the budget deficit. When I talked about things you could do in a fiscally responsible way, it would be mainly to say, let's do more targeted actions now to put people back to work, but have it be part of a comprehensive plan to deal with the budget deficit. So nothing says you have to cut spending this year or raise taxes this year. You can do a fiscal expansion this year, but have it be part of a package that ultimately gets the budget deficit down.